Hello and welcome to 5.8, the impacts of overfishing. And this is actually a really short section for us. So let's take a look. We're going to talk about the cause and problems related to overfishing. And then we're going to look at the fact that overfishing or catching too many fish has led to an extreme scarcity of some fish species, not all. And whenever you take any one or more different species out of an ecosystem, it can lessen what is known as biodiversity, or the amount of different species in any given area. So let's see what we got. The word fishery is basically the population of fish that are used for commercial fishing. So out in the North Atlantic, there are fisheries for tuna, there are fisheries for cod, there are fisheries for swordfish, and if you go over to, let's say, the Bering Sea over in Alaska, there are fisheries for halibut, and they even call it fishing for crabs. Now, in the event that the fishery loses 90% of its population due to overfishing, that is known as fishery collapse. And the problem is, two problems. People take just straight up too many fish, so therefore the numbers go down. But more important, they take out fish that are of reproductive age. So if you take out too many young fish, they don't have a chance to mature. And if you take out too many big fish that are good producers of eggs, that could also, knock down the population. So it's a double-edged sword. You can't take too many juvenile fish. You can't take too many old fish. It's not good. Populations may never recover because once that biodiversity goes down, there's less fish to find mates. There's less food to eat. And then ultimately what happens is something called inbreeding depression. And this happens when the fish are too closely related to each other and their genetics or their DNA is not good. And the organism that is born may be born, but it's going to be unhealthy. It may not grow right. It may die young. So taking too many fish causing less availability for mates is a large problem. The key there is the decrease in genetic biodiversity. So if you begin to start taking, once again, out too many fish, the ones that are left may be related to each other. Now, I know that fish don't seek out mates, but when the female lays the eggs and the male comes in with the sperm, in the event that those two fish happen to be related closely somewhere, it could be a major problem. As for economic consequences, there is a loss of income for fishermen, and there's a loss of income in tourism. A lot of people, especially down in the South, may go fishing for things like marlin or things like sailfish, and if those fish are not there, people are not going to plan their trip down to places like Key West, and they may not use the charter boats to go fishing for leisure, not even just for income or to eat these fish. The economic impact is huge, and if you look here in around, let's say the 80s, things were really kind of picking up, I guess, I don't want to say digitally, electronically, so things like fish finders and things like that, and radar. So what happened was they were doing great in the 80s. They were catching a lot of fish. They were worth a lot of money. But as the technology got better and the boats got better and the equipment got better, you can see that the number of fish caught and the value of that fish dropped down by, 2 to 3 times lower. It dropped a lot. So overfishing from 75 to 85 led to sharp losses for the next, 30 years. And that brings us back to this thing called the tragedy of the commons. That was the very first thing we did here in this particular take-home section. And what that means is the open ocean is pretty much nobody's. So if you go out and fish or overfish it, it's almost like first come, first serve. That first crew gets all of the money and all of the fish, and everybody else gets nothing. So it's not really that good. And here's the zoomed in chart of that, but you can see the economic impact is huge. That in just that, about 20-year span, it dropped down significantly. Another thing fishermen do is something called bottom trawling, and here they literally just drag a net over the bottom. So things like shrimp and other kind of shellfish may be in the bottom. So it basically has them drag a net, but it's majorly harmful for a lot of other things. So if you see, let's say bottom fish that live on the bottom, they're going to drag a net. But if you notice, there are rock structures and there are coral structures and other things that may be beneficial. After the net comes through, there are none. And that is bad because those habitats, those rock structures, those reef structures could have been necessary for all of those fish to maybe lay their eggs to make more fish, kind of offered them protection. We talked about that in the coral reef section when we did aquatic biomes. And what you're going to end up with is something called bycatch. And this is a vocabulary word that will show up in a lot of questions. And bycatch is basically what you didn't want, but it's dead anyway, so you throw it back. So a lot of dolphins and whales and turtles could get caught up in these nets. And the problem with dolphins, whales, and turtles, they do swim, they live in the ocean, but they do need to come to the surface to breathe. So if they end up getting trapped in a net, they will suffocate. And the fishermen just basically chuck them overboard and pretend like it never happened. It's horrible, but it happens. You can see here, in addition to destroying the bottom, it stirs up sediment. And there's our word turbidity again, and that makes the water cloudy. So now that sediment is in the water and ocean currents may carry that sediment somewhere else, that sediment may block the sun. So the net destroyed the coral reefs, but the turbidity or the cloudiness of the water could also decrease your coral production because it blocks the sun. All of this, of course, is leading to decreased biodiversity because you're doing it by accident, but it's not good. You're killing these non-target species. You're killing things you weren't even going for, but then you just throw them back. And of course, removing the coral reef habitat and coral reefs are very, very, very productive places. And when they're gone or broken, then these little fish can't lay eggs there. Now, we talked a little bit about this in the food web section, but this is a really good example. So if you look up, starting at the bottom, you have phytoplankton, which we talked about are small microscopic plants, if you will, or algae that floats. Zooplankton would be little small animals that float that eat the plankton, and you have the little bit bigger fish eat those, and then larger fish, mammals, and birds eat those. Well, what happens is, as we go after large predatory fish, things that we like, things that are yummy, for example, these, tuna, sturgeon, rockfish, salmon, when we take those out, there's a problem. So what happens is we then move to the next size fish, because, well, we want to eat these fish. Now, when you start taking those, when you deplete the smaller fish, that now is less fish for the bigger fish to eat. And once those fish are gone, then you start to see a problem in your marine mammals because they don't have anything to eat, or your seabirds. So as you work your way down, it's very interesting what happens. You're going to have less fish, less forage fish, which means less marine mammals, less seabirds. But watch what happens now. Without those forage fish, the zooplankton goes up. Now there's tons of that because there's no fish eating it. Well, they eat plankton. Plankton goes down. And plankton is a major source, because it's photosynthetic, of the oxygen that we breathe on this planet. So do you see how just taking all of these sturgeon and tuna have a humongous effect on many areas of the food web and these trophic levels? So again, big deal. So the Convention of International Trade and Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora was kind of introduced, and basically that is trying to address the problems with overfishing worldwide by trying to look at these common areas and figuring out a way to either limit the fish or to put some kind of penalty on these fishermen that are kind of destroying these ecosystems, because you can see it is going to be a major, major problem. Forget about the fact that tuna is going to be $100 a pound. It's everything else that falls down with it. So overfishing is a big deal. So wrapping it up, FRQ 5.8, propose a solution to address the issue of fishery depletion. And again, this would be one of those, I don't want to say an opinion question, but it's pretty wide open. So as long as you come up with a good, idea and you can explain it, you'll get the points. So hopefully that was helpful.